Main event of the evening.
These days are
Hello and welcome to These Days Are Ours, a Happy Days podcast. I'm Peter.
And I'm Joe.
And today we are discussing Season 9, Episode 4, Another Night at Antoine's.
Okay, Peter, tell us what happens in Another Night at Antoine's.
We open at Arnold's, where Chachi is ogling other girls as Joanie tries to talk to him.
Chachi, I'm talking to you here.
Oh, I know. Now I'm listening.
All right, what'd I say?
You said, Chachi, I'm talking here.
She calls him out on it and storms out. Jenny explains to Chachi that Joanie is on edge because their acquaintance Sandra is newly going steady with her boyfriend Artie. He got her an ID bracelet and everything. Meanwhile, Joanie and Chachi have been going out twice as long, and her wrist is still naked.
You're in the doghouse, buddy.
That night at the Cunningham house, Joanie and Jenny are having a sleepover, and Jenny reveals to Joanie that Chachi is going to give her an ID bracelet. Sure enough, Chachi arrives, and Jenny reluctantly goes upstairs to let them be alone.
Sure, I've been thrown out of better places. I've been thrown out of worse places. I've been thrown out of a lot of places.
Chachi says it's time that he and Joanie made an important step in their relationship. Last summer, Joanie said that Chachi spent a lot of time chasing her instead of other girls, and at the time, Chachi said he didn't care. Well, he was wrong, and now he wants to date other girls while Joanie dates other guys, so they can really be sure about each other.
Now listen, we've been through some good times together, and I will always cherish that, but we still want to date around and see other people.
Joanie's smile freezes on her face, and Chachi, happy that Joanie isn't crying, leaves. Joanie takes out her rage on the coat rack.
Would you like this?
A week later at Arnold's, Chachi has been dating around and he's sick of other girls, but he's afraid he can't make amends with Joanie and his life is ruined. Al has Roger talk to Chachi, and Roger tries to strike up a conversation about the philosophy of Hobbes.
Now, he believed that fate alone could dictate a man's life. Anything that's going to happen is already happening. There's nothing you can do about it. That's a pep talk?
Al makes him leave. Then Fonzie tries to talk to Chachi and has no better luck. Finally, it's Al's turn, and he simply tells Chachi not to end up like him.
There's this woman that I care very much about, and I let her slip through my fingers.
Chachi bolts out of Arnold's. Chachi runs into the Cunningham living room, where another guy is waiting.
Who are you?
I'm William Farnsworth. I'm Joanie's date for this evening.
When Joanie comes down, she tells Chachi they're going to Chez Antoine. They leave, and Howard calls Fonzie over to get the moping Chachi off of his couch. Chachi perks up upon hearing that Joanie cried over him.
She cried over me?
Now he's happy.
And then complains to Fonzie that Bill can afford to take Joanie to places like Chez Antoine. Chachi decides to go over there to watch for Joanie and Bill, and begs Fonzie to come with him. Fonzie reluctantly agrees, when Chachi says he'll pay. Joanie and Bill are enjoying the romantic atmosphere of Chez Antoine. Violin music, roses, champagne, the works.
Good evening and welcome to Chez Antoine, restaurant of romance.
They order the love steak, and then they go to dance. Chachi and Fonzie arrive, and are given ties by the maitre d' for the sake of the dress code. He also adds, upon hearing that there is no lady and it's just the two guys, that Chez Antoine opens its doors for all types.
What does he mean by types?
While Fonzie is initially charmed by the atmosphere, he and Chachi soon realize they're the only non-boy-girl couple there, and decide to leave. Then Fonzie is confronted by a woman named Andrea. Howard told her where to find him, and she says they had a date tonight. Fonzie insists it was tomorrow night, and as they bicker, Joanie spots them.
That's Fonz. I wonder what's the matter.
With Chachi gone, Fonzie plays off Andrea as his date, and Chachi comes in to claim he lost his keys. Joanie realizes Chachi was spying on her, but she's flattered that he went to that effort for her. Bill is miffed that he spent $38 here, and Joanie is interested in this guy. He storms out.
I'm sorry, Bill.
Well, sorry, my Aunt Minnie.
Joanie and Chachi start to bicker, but Fonzie facilitates a reconciliation before he goes after his date. Chachi admits he doesn't want to date other girls, just Joanie, and he gives her an ID bracelet.
Joanie? You got any money?
Back at the Cunningham house, Joanie and Chachi are making out in front of an uncomfortable Howard when Fonzie and Andrea arrive, along with the violinist from Chez Antoine. Andrea, prompted by Fonzie, says she was wrong and Fonzie was right, and that their date was for tomorrow.
I told you, I've never stood up a girl in my life, huh?
They go up to Fonzie's apartment, and Joanie goes up to her room. Chachi asks Howard if he liked Bill better than Chachi, and Howard lists off all the ways Bill is superior to Chachi.
He was a nice dresser, polite, sophisticated, mature, and he's wealthy.
Then Chachi mentions Bill has his own apartment, and Howard says he likes Chachi better.
Thank you, Peter. That was Another Night at Antoine's. It first aired back on October 27th, 1981. Happy Days had been preempted the week before because of the World Series, but this night they were back with a brand new episode. Happy Days was followed by a new Laverne and Shirley in which the girls get into a fight that leaves Laverne with a broken jaw. NBC aired the made-for-TV movie The Brady Girls Get Married, in which Marcia and Jan plan a double wedding and move into the same rundown house.
Next, the original Brady Bunch cast is back for the wedding of the year.
Both of us getting married at the same time. I think I better sit down.
You are sitting down.
It's double romance as the Brady Girls get married.
And CBS had a couple of animated Halloween specials, Bugs Bunny's Halloween special and the Fat Albert Halloween special.
There'll be magic in the air when you join your favorite hair. Friends coming from far and near.
Pity it only comes once a year.
There's lots of fun to be seen on Bugs Bunny's Halloween.
The first one had Bugs and Witch Hazel competing to see who could be scarier. The second one had the Cosby Kids trying to scare some weird people in their Philadelphia neighborhood. So, Peter, of those three choices, what are you watching?
Well, normally I'd go with Bugs Bunny, but I really don't want to see Fat Albert or the Cosby Kids. So maybe I'll just watch the Bugs Bunny special and then turn off the TV and go outside.
I am watching the Bugs Bunny Halloween special and then switching over to the Brady Girls Get Married.
Yeah, it's kind of amazing how there's this entire sub-universe of Brady Bunch content and just nobody ever really talks about it, even though that first show is so iconic because it was in syndication for like 1 million years and it's burned into everyone's brains.
Now we're not talking about the Osmond family. We're not talking about the Nelson family. We're not talking about the Partridge family. We're talking about the Fat Brady Bunch.
Another Night at Antoine's was directed by Jerry Paris and was written by Mark Rothman. The most recent of Mark's episodes we covered was Scholarship. As for guest stars this week, let's start with Anson Downs as William Bill Farnsworth.
My, you sure do have a winning sense of humor.
Anson is an actor turned producer with a very interesting career. Before Happy Days, he had been in the movies Carrie, Urban Cowboy, and Coming Attractions. He'd also been a regular on Man from Atlantis.
Hail Atlantis.
After this episode, Anson guested on Joanie Loves Chachi, plus he was a cast member on The Dave Thomas Comedy Show, and guested on Knots Landing. His other movie acting credits include Perfect, You Can't Hurry Love, and Boris and Natasha.
Boris, Natasha.
Since the late 90s, Anson has been producing movies and TV shows, many of which star John Travolta. His films include
Battlefield Earth, Hairspray, Lucky Numbers, Old Dogs, Gotti, Swordfish, and more.
He also produced a couple of Travolta's TV series, including American Crime Story Season 1 and Die Hard. So, Peter, what did you think of Anson Downs as William Bill Farnsworth?
I was surprised by how much I liked him. He just comes across as this very earnest, charming, dorky person. I was half expecting for the episode to reveal that he was secretly a jerk in order to make Chachi look better, which is something that this show has done before, but no. Instead, when Joanie is bizarrely charmed by Chachi, following her on her date, he's justifiably annoyed, and he decides, okay, I'm leaving.
Screw you guys. I'm going home.
Goodbye. I wasted $38 in 1960s money here, and I'm not going to waste any more. He tries to get a doggy bag, but they don't do doggy bags at Chez Antoine, so shame for him.
I would like a doggy bag.
In Paris, the doggies fend for themselves.
I also liked Anson Downs quite a lot in this episode as this hapless and quite nice nerd that is dating Joanie. And like you, I was relieved that there was not a story where he became a jerk later in the episode or tried to take advantage of Joanie in some way. Obviously, Gary Marshall liked him because they brought him back for Joanie Loves Chachi. We also have Robin Bach as the waiter at Chez Antoine. Robin was an actor from New Jersey who worked very steadily in TV in the 80s and early 90s, often typecast as waiters, clerks, and hotel managers. He'll be back on Happy Days as another waiter next season, and he also guested on Laverne and Shirley. He made multiple appearances on Columbo, Murder, She Wrote, Simon & Simon, and Gimme a Break. His other credits include Dallas, Hill Street Blues, Charles in Charge, Designing Women, Punky Brewster, Mama's Family, Max Headroom, and much more. He is supposedly in Russ Meyer's Beyond the Valley of the Dolls.
Recently, 20th Century Fox had two great ideas. To make a film called Beyond the Valley of the Dolls, and to get Russ Meyer to write, produce, and direct it.
Tragically, Robin died of AIDS in 1991. He was 43 years old. So, Peter, what did you think of Robin Bach as our waiter?
He was also very fun in an opposite way from Bill Farnsworth. He's a French maitre d'. Of course, he's going to be a jerk because that's the stereotype, but he's a jerk in a very fun way. And he doesn't go out of his way to be a jerk. He's just trying to maintain the atmosphere of his restaurant. He doesn't kick out Fonzie and Chachi because they're not up to par for the dress code. He just gives them the necessary ties and he lets them go in. And he even lets Chachi badly tie his own tie. And his response to Bill when he asked for a doggy bag, in France, the doggies fend for themselves. That was great.
I also liked the Pshaw bit that he did.
May I suggest our love steak for two?
Ah, by all means.
It is served with our world famous potatoes par Chanel.
What's that?
Passion potato.
Oh.
It sounds wonderful.
Oh, Pshaw.
I think Robin is the highlight of this episode as this very sarcastic waiter who gets in these little digs at his customers who are probably getting on his nerves all day. And he pretends to be very fancy. And I like how he can turn that personality off in a heartbeat when Joanie and Bill order love steak and passion potatoes. He then yells to the chef, 2 number 5s.
He's probably not actually French. It's all just an act.
This is basically a show that he's putting on for the customers. I can understand why Robin got typecast as waiters and played them over and over again because he's so funny in this part. We also have Barbara Treutlar as Andrea, Fonzie's girlfriend.
My name is Andrea. That's right, Andrea.
Barbara was on Happy Days last season as Lois in It Only Hurts When I Smile. Again, Barbara was a TV actress of the 1980s and early 90s who became a production accountant and now works on various reality shows like Flip or Flop Atlanta. Peter, did Barbara Treutlar make any impression on you as Andrea?
Yes, she did, and not just because she looks like Debbie Harry. I thought her back and forthing with Fonzie was very fun. The joke in the tag about how Fonzie very much insists that he needs to be right and he needs her to say that he was right, that's very consistent with his character, and it's very amusing. I will say that making him an 8-course meal seems a little bit excessive. That is too many courses.
I also enjoy Barbara Treutlar as Andrea. Fonzie goes through a lot of girlfriends on the show, but I think it's telling when Happy Days brings an actress back for a second go. Barbara was also quite amusing in It Only Hurts When I Smile. She was one who walked out on Fonzie because he couldn't kiss her anymore with his toothache. They brought her back for a second round, and I think that's a testament to Barbara. And I hope she's happy as a production accountant for reality shows. That sounds like an interesting job.
May you be happy in the life you've chosen.
The violinist at Antoine's is uncredited, which I thought was unfair because this guy does a lot of work in this episode. He's running all over the restaurant, playing violin, playing different songs on command, and then Fonzie actually brings him home to follow him around.
Presumably to play the romantic music as he and Andrea are doing it. I hope he's getting paid.
I was hoping that too, that he wasn't just doing this for free.
Maybe he's just doing it for love of the craft, for the love of the romantic atmosphere.
That's another possibility. He is just so committed to romance that he will follow around Fonzie and Andrea just to provide atmosphere. As for songs this week, we again hear That's Life, a top 10 hit for Frank Sinatra in 1966. I think they just played that last week. We also hear Rhythm of the Rain, a top 10 hit for the Cascades in 1963.
Listen to the rhythm of the falling rain, telling me just what a fool I've been.
The violinist at Antoine's plays La Vie en Rose.
You know they have a dance floor.
Oh, I'd love to.
This was the signature song of French vocalist Edith Piaf, and she wrote the lyrics herself. It was first released in 1947 by Edith. Lots of singers have covered it since then, including Grace Jones, Bing Crosby, Donna Summer, and Lady Gaga. Peter, are you familiar with the song La Vie en Rose?
Indeed I am.
And were you aware that Grace Jones had done a version?
I was.
I was not, and now I have to check that out. That sounds awesome.
Quand il me prend dans ses bras, il me parle tout bas, je vois la vie en rose.
We also hear Isn't It Romantic when Fonzie and Chachi arrive at Chez Antoine. This is a show tune by Rodgers and Hart, first written for the 1932 film Love Me Tonight. Isn't It Romantic has kind of a history on Happy Days. They've played it a few times. And in fact, I think there was a full production number with the whole cast singing.
Yes, with Al on the lead. So that's nice.
The violinist also plays Fascination.
Some people just don't know how to behave at the better places. And why isn't he wearing a tie?
A popular waltz written in 1904, a version with lyrics debuted in 1905. It's been recorded by many artists over the years, including Nat King Cole. Dinah Shore took it to number 15 in 1957.
It was fascinating
As for cultural and historical references this week, the plot of this episode revolves around Chachi giving Joanie an ID bracelet. This was a genuine fad of the 1950s. Boys would give engraved metal bracelets with their own names on them to girls they were dating. The fad cooled off in the 60s and 70s, but came back big time in the 1980s when monogamy again became popular among young people. Jenny says, is Chubby Checker chubby?
Is Chubby Checker chubby? Of course, I'm sure.
South Carolina-born singer Ernest Evans never really was particularly overweight, but he gained the nickname Chubby while working at a produce market in Philadelphia. It was Dick Clark's wife who gave him the stage name Chubby Checker, a pun on Fats Domino. In later decades, when you see Chubby Checker, he's not chubby at all, and I think it's because he spent the last 50 years dancing on stage constantly. Jenny also predicts that Chachi will sing Oh Promise Me at his wedding to Joanie.
You give her your bracelet, then later you give her an engagement ring. You rent a hall, sing Oh Promise Me. You get bald, she gets fat, and everyone's happy.
Oh Promise Me is a popular song written in 1887 by Reginald de Koven and Clement Scott.
Oh, promise me that someday you and I will take our love together to some sky.
For many decades, it was a standard at weddings, especially ones in TV shows and movies. It's been performed on sitcoms like All in the Family and Mama's Family. I was not familiar with this one, Oh Promise Me. Had you ever heard it performed anywhere?
Nope.
Roger discusses Thomas Hobbes, an English philosopher of the early 17th century, whose views have extensively influenced modern politics. But Roger is wrong in saying that Hobbes believed man was merely being guided by fate. In fact, Hobbes taught that man has the liberty to do what he wants as long as there are no external impediments to get in his way. Peter, why would he single out Thomas Hobbes as somebody who believes in fate?
I think Roger might just be kind of not smart.
We've had multiple examples of Roger talking about subjects that he really knows nothing about and sounding very authoritative, but being completely wrong. But Roger correctly quotes St. Augustine, aka Augustine of Hippo.
I feel like St. Augustine of Hippo after his conversion by Ambrose of Milan.
The Stoic conception of fate is mistaken since angels and men have free will. Augustine was a theologian of the 4th and 5th centuries. That quote comes from a book of Christian philosophy called On the City of God Against the Pagans, in which he refutes the doctrine of fate. Fonzie refers to Chachi as Gloomy Gus.
You're getting very repetitive, you gloomy Gus.
Gloomy Gus was a character in the comic strip Happy Hooligan, which ran from 1900 to 1932. It was about a hobo with an incredibly optimistic look on life. Gloomy Gus was his pessimistic brother.
So Gloomy Gus is another one of those things where it comes from like an actual character and it's not just a thing that people say.
That's right. That'd crack up the audience.
Bill says that his frat brothers call him Mr. Rumba. Rumba is a type of dance music that was popular in the 1930s. It combines big band jazz with Afro-Cuban rhythms. Everybody rumba! When Bill says that his frat brothers call him Mr. Rumba, Joanie says, oh, I'm sure they didn't mean anything by it. Does she think that Mr. Rumba is an insult?
I guess so. Maybe she doesn't know what rumba is. I know Joanie is very ensconced in white middle-class America, but I didn't think she was that ensconced in it.
Bill complains about spending $38. That's about $370 in today's money.
You see, he was right to be annoyed at Chachi and at Joanie.
That is a very hefty markup on steak and potatoes. And Bill insults Chachi's Windsor knot.
And you call that a Windsor knot?
This wide knot for neckties is named after the Duke of Windsor and is the only acceptable knot in the Royal Air Force. Other observations this week, Joanie says Chachi is oogling other girls.
Oh, come on, I got better things to do than to sit here being ignored by you and watching you oogle other girls.
I hadn't heard the pronunciation oogle before, except in the song The Creep by The Lonely Island.
As they disrobed, I was oogling and ogling.
Had you heard oogling anywhere?
Only in the same place you have.
Wouldn't Joanie and Chachi be way past this going steady ID bracelet stuff? This seems like a story that should have happened a couple of seasons ago.
Yeah, and like you said, it's the early to mid 1960s now. ID bracelets shouldn't be trendy anymore.
Do I even have to keep saying that Joanie and Chachi are a bad couple? This is yet another episode that shows why they don't work together. My feeling is that Joanie and Chachi have a physical attraction to one another.
A neurochemical con job.
but have completely incompatible personalities, and trying to make this relationship work will be torture for both of them.
Yeah. I think it would be better if I didn't know how it's going to end. When you're a teenager and you have a dysfunctional relationship, it's fine. You're a teenager. You'll mature and grow out of it and move on to less dysfunctional ones. But they're going to spend at least some of their adulthood together, and it's probably not going to be great for either of them, but especially not for Joanie, because Chachi is the worst.
I can only imagine their relationship ultimately ending in heartbreak, so I wish somebody would advise them to break up for their own sake. But in this episode, I did like how Howard gleefully sends Chachi into the living room, knowing that William is already there.
Where's Joanie? We got a lot of talking to do.
Well, she'll be down in a minute, Chachi. Why don't you go in the living room and wait, huh?
Right.
I like that Howard is using this as entertainment for himself.
Yeah, Howard's just vibing, and honestly good for him.
He's just the god of chaos in this episode. He's just like, okay, I'm going to push Chachi out there and just see what happens.
Oh, hello, woman who says she has a date with Fonzie tonight. Here's where you can find him. I hope you go and make the situation worse.
And I know he's been wearing it for a while now, but I am really starting to hate Chachi's leg bandana. In this episode, I started to hope that it would cut off his circulation and that and that gangrene would set in. What do you think of Chachi's leg bandana?
I think it looks dumb, but in a way that makes sense for a teenager. I buy that a teenager would wear that and think, yeah, this is the coolest thing ever.
There is a little bit of subtext in this episode. Types seems to be this episode's euphemism for gay men. Is that how you interpreted it?
As mentioned in the summary, when Fonzie and Chachi go to Chez Antoine and it's just them, the maitre d' says, don't worry, we accept all types here. Yeah, the subtext is that he thinks that Fonzie and Chachi are a gay couple, which on the one hand is kind of iffy because Chachi is Fonzie's underage cousin, but the maitre d' doesn't know that. And two, wow, that is remarkably progressive for a restaurant in pre-Stonewall America.
It reminded me of the Seinfeld, not that there's anything wrong with it episode.
Not that there's anything wrong with that.
No, of course not.
I mean, it's fine if that's who you are.
Absolutely.
So, Peter, were there any outstanding Happy Days fashions in this episode?
Joanie's red dress that she wore to Chez Antoine was very nice. Not like super fancy, but fancy enough that it's believable as something you would wear to a nice French romantic restaurant.
I forgot, does Bill wear anything particularly memorable?
Sadly, no. Which is a shame because, I feel like he'd be the kind of guy who'd really rock a plaid necktie.
So, Peter, I will ask that age-old timeless question, was this episode any good?
This episode was better than I expected. For an episode about how Chachi is a jealous, controlling creep. Again. I think it's better than last week's episode because you've got fun stuff like Bill and Andrea and just the entirety of Chez Antoine. But I am really, really sick and tired of Chachi. I wish that he and Joanie would break up, and I know that's not going to happen.
There was a lot in this episode that I really liked. Anson Downs, I think, is very funny as Bill Farnsworth, this hopeless, helpless nerd. I loved Robin Bach as the snooty waiter at Chez Antoine. I loved all of Chez Antoine, the tacky decor and the strolling violinist. I thought it was all very funny, but I was very, very disappointed by Chachi's behavior in this episode. I think the worst part of the episode is when Chachi is gloating over the fact that Joanie cried over him.
Yeah, why would you be happy that you caused this wonderful girl to be sad? You absolute creep.
Chachi is just a manipulative monster in this episode. It's really sad that Joanie is involved with him. And I would say the worst thing about the Chachi Arcola character is that he kind of ruins Joanie. Remember Joanie, how she was in the early seasons of the show? She was
fun and she was spunky and she was mischievous. And now every time there's a Joanie-centric episode, it's going to be about her deeply tedious, uncomfortable thing with Chachi.
She was so strong-willed in the early seasons of the show. She was the one often keeping Richie's ego in check by zinging him all the time, and she was not ever going to be pushed around. And now it seems like she's kind of a fool for love. Basically, she's being led around by Chachi and she's being mistreated and used by Chachi, and she keeps coming back for more Chachi. It's very disheartening to watch this change in the Joanie Cunningham character because she was one of the most fun things about the early seasons of Happy Days, and now she's one of the most distressing things about the later seasons of Happy Days. A bad move for Joanie Cunningham as a character, but some really fun stuff in this episode. So I am going to say watch another night at Antoine's, mainly for the restaurant Antoine's and the guest stars.
Yeah, you can make this your only Joanie Chachi episode.
Yeah, if you have to limit yourself to one mushy Joanie Chachi episode, Another Night at Antoine's is a good choice. So, Peter, how can people keep up with us and find out about all the wonderful things we are doing?
Listeners can follow us on Twitter at Fonzie Podcast. They can follow me on Twitter at Peter Volfranc. That's PeterVulfranc.
And they can follow me on Twitter at Joe_A_Blevins. They can find this podcast online at thesedaysofours.libsyn.com. And they can email us with questions, comments, and concerns at thesedaysofourspodcast@gmail.com. So, Peter, what do we have on the docket for next week?
Next week, Lori Beth gives birth in Little Baby Cunningham.
That sounds like a very exciting and memorable episode. So, see you later, alligator.
In a while, crocodile.
Pretty women are walking with gorillas down my street. From my window I'm staring while my coffee goes cold. Look over there, there's a lady that I used to know. She's married now or engaged or something, so I'm told. Is she really going out with him? Is she really gonna take him home tonight? Is she really going out with him? If my eyes don't deceive me, there's something going wrong with you.
In Paris, the doggies fend for themselves.